You got the classic Donkey Kong Country trilogy and the modern Donkey Kong Country duology, the latter of which even features Funky Kong as a playable character. Hell yeah. These are all some of the finest 2D platformers this genre has ever seen, but while the Super Nintendo games had a super satisfying arc of releases, ain't it insane that they really only made 2 DK side-scrollers in the last 15 years and spread them out to 5 individual releases? It's interesting, whether this big old furball was being handled by Rareware or Retro Studios, the 2 DKC styles may not be totally identical, but there is a sense of flow that is unparalleled here. There's a sense of level design that feels more handcrafted than most other big platformer franchises. There's an atmosphere that you achieve where the lush visuals and incredible soundtracks come together beautifully, and all of this DK hype with Bonanza and the future of this franchise, it got me thinking, in a world where indie platformers are consistently wearing their inspirations on their sleeve, ain't it weird that you can't really think of many that come remotely close to being considered a Donkey Kong Country clone? Yeah, you already know what this video is all about. I actually found a few. It's not many, but this is still a scene worth spotlighting. I got 5 indies to bring to your attention today, hopefully with many more to come, so let's go. Let's talk about some indie Donkey Kong Country clones. It is on like Donkey Kong. I don't know if that phrase is still copyrighted, but I'm gonna risk it.
Okay!
So the first and most obvious one of the bunch is Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, and this game's existence just makes all the sense in the world. You know, after Yooka-Laylee, which was the entire point of that original game, was to capture the spark and the fire of the original Banjo-Kazooie and the Rareware 3D games of all those years gone by, so why not, while they're working on whatever they were working on, I guess it was Yooka-Laylee and whatever else they were going to be doing in the future, let's take a step back, let's make a 2D game and have it be inspired by Donkey Kong Country, the other Rareware project. That it makes perfect sense, and on top of that, this game is incredible, it's the best Yooka game so far. Now mechanically, I feel like it's a little more akin to Tropical Freeze and Returns than it is the Super Nintendo games. You feel just a little bit floatier and not as snappy as the Super Nintendo games, but otherwise, it really works with this style of game. You're going through all of these levels, you're jumping around, getting a whole bunch of collectibles, some of the things that make it feel like Donkey Kong Country, or you have these bonus stages they can go into that bring you into an entirely different arena for taking out all the enemies, doing certain other things in time limits, like that whole element feels very much like Donkey Kong Country, and all of the platforming being done with like an environmental storytelling approach to the level design also makes it very much feel like a modern Donkey Kong Country game. One of the primary things you can do in this game is roll off of platforms, and while you're in midair, you can do a jump out of it. That is such a quintessential Donkey Kong Country mechanic, and the fact that this game is here means it feels more like Donkey Kong than Mario. But rather than just playing it safe and making a game that feels like Donkey Kong Country and nothing more, there are 2 whole original ideas, at least in this context, that make this game go heads and shoulders above the rest in my eyes. For one, the dual level idea. Every single stage is in a book, and once you complete a stage, later on in the game, you'll be able to manipulate something in the overworld to access another way to play that same level. Maybe the level will be filled with water now. Maybe it'll just be more dangerous in general. There's gonna be a level later on where now it's tilted 90 degrees. It's so cool, and it's actually super refreshing playing these stages in entirely different ways twice over. That's awesome. It's such a fun way to go and experience just a slight change in an existing area, but still have to go for the challenge of get all the collectibles. Do you remember this area? Kinda? Good luck. But then there is also the overworld manipulation idea. I adore the overworld in Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. Really has strong vibes of Donkey Kong Country 3. One of the things I loved about that game was being able to explore more freely and find some secrets all the way in this big old island. And the area in Impossible Lair just expands on that greatly. Not only are there secrets to find, there's like a whole bunch of tonics all over the place they can bring back to Vendy, and then unlock special manipulators for your levels like graphic designs and difficulty options, all that sort of stuff. But there's moving platforms and other characters to interact with, and certain mini side quests, and all these different triggers that are used to change up how you access the other sides of those levels. Like the one level that you go back into but it's flooded now, well, that's because back in the overworld, you flip the switch and now water is flowing into the book. That is such a fantastic idea. So you wrap all that up with really good visuals, a fantastic soundtrack by the likes of Grant Kirkhope and the occasional David Wise, which I always love when he shows up. The characters are super charming. Obviously, the Impossible Lair, this incredibly challenging gauntlet that gets easier the more you play the game. It's just a damn good time. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, absolute thumbs up.
Okay.
And now we have a game that's more reminiscent of these Super Nintendo games in pretty blatant fashion, but I don't know, I don't really care. Here we have Kaze and the Wild Masks. This game is awesome. So this game and the rest of the games going forward are certainly not the most original of the bunch. They all wear their inspiration on their sleeve, way stronger than Yuka did, but they all still shine through by showing off really great level design, music, and all that sort of stuff. And Kaze, while being likely the most unoriginal of the bunch, you have these transformations with the mask idea. You can turn into a flying bird and a swimming shark. There's an auto-running segment. You once again have the Donkey Kong Country roll that you can do when you go off of a ledge. The bonus stages, that's very reminiscent as well. But this game excels at something that Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair does not. When I say the game is more inspired by the Super Nintendo games rather than the modern Donkey Kong games, comes down to tighter control, higher challenge, and less of the level design being based around environmental storytelling and just being really good pixel work that they got a platform around. Because realistically, what you see here is kind of what you get. You play as this little bunny Kaze, you're off to save your brother who's been kidnapped from you, and then you do fairly basic and straightforward 2D platforming in order to do so. And it only takes a couple hours to see the game through to its completion, and that's all you need. Just a nice, breezy, couple hour long adventure with some challenge and really solid platforming. You got collectible golden letters that spell out the name Kaze. Once again, man, it's a Donkey Kong Country clone. I'm not shaming that. I think the word clone can be taken as a negative a lot of times, but not to me. I think if you're a fan of Donkey Kong Country, specifically the Super Nintendo games, there's probably a good part of you that will enjoy this game more than the Impossible Lair. It's really good. Plus, if you're a fan of just really detailed sprite work, like I'll rep a game just based off of really gorgeous sprite work alone, and Kaze and the Wild Masks, it looks really good too.
Okay.
One of the most confusing releases to me of the past generation has been Marsupilami Hoob Adventure, because realistically, not many people in America know what Marsupilami is, and this game kind of just got announced randomly without much hype behind it, and then it just came and went with no fuss whatsoever. Turns out Marsupilami is a fairly big-ish comic franchise in Europe, and there was actually a Marsupilami game all the way back on the Sega Genesis, which I know nothing about, besides it has really interesting and fairly detailed wavy tail physics. So while I would initially just kind of toss this game off to the side as just some licensed game from the pits of nowhere, you take a look at this and then suddenly, oh, they're trying to be Donkey Kong with this. Okay, I'll bite. Now the way Marsupilami controls is a little bit floatier than he is snappy, and you can see there's a lot more environmental manipulation going around, so this is a little bit more inspired by the modern Donkey Kong Country games, even down to having silhouette levels for the bonus stages. And even the world map, honestly, feels so Donkey Kong Country Returns to me. Like, that's where my mind goes, and I love it, because at the end of the day, fun game with the character that I don't know anything about, and it's just a solid platformer. Like, I don't know, in the comics, can he use his tail to grapple onto enemies, kind of homing attack Sonic style? I don't know, but it's cool that he can do it. And then you go into these little toucan birds and then they shoot you off like barrels from like, and you're like, come on now. That's kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's kind of fun. And even when you get to the end of stages, there's a gigantic fruit and you gotta mash the button to see how many bites you can take out of it before time runs out. Like, man, it's shameless, and I kind of love that about this game. Thankfully, because I'm pretty confident not a whole lot of people out there are going to be well kept in the lore of Marsupilami, you do not need to have any knowledge of the comic, or there even was a cartoon back in the day. You don't need to know anything about those to enjoy this game, so I can recommend it wholeheartedly. One of the better 2D platformers you can find out there, Marsupilami Hoob Adventure. Why not, man? You can take any other franchise and make a 2D platform out of it, apparently. Can we do this with Garfield next?
Okay.
Nico de Rico The Magical World. Now, once again, because the type of game that I love, I saw this game and immediately went, okay, I guess I have to buy it, because not only is this a gorgeous looking game, it is very clearly a Donkey Kong Country inspired game with a little bit of a mishmash of 2D and 3D. David Wise also worked on the soundtrack. And oh my god, that alone was like, okay, yeah, whatever you ask for, I'll pay, because having a game attached to a David Wise soundtrack, I'm all in. And once again, when it comes to the Donkey Kong Country mechanics, it's all here. The environmental storytelling and manipulation of the modern games here in full effect, plus you also have animal riding buddies as well, and they kind of operate as you would expect them to, so that's cool. Once again, it's shameless, but I don't mind. I mean, look at the yellow things you're collecting here, by the way. They look like lums from Rayman. You're collecting the golden letters, and now you got lums from Rayman. Like, cool, man. But, this game does still do something that is entirely original for this style of game. Occasionally, you'll be in the 2D space, you'll go down the right corridor, and then boom. Now it's like Crash Bandicoot 4. Bro, what? This is so damn cool that they spliced in a little bit of modern Crash Bandicoot with a modern Donkey Kong Country game. That is so sick. Realistically, a lot of these 3D areas don't take up a ton of the game, and the platforming challenge here is pretty minimal compared to the 2D platforming stuff, but it just kind of feels like really cool fan service because of course you have stages where you're running away from the camera doing basic platforming there with or without an animal buddy. There are some times you're being chased as well. Who can say no to that, right? You know what I'm thinking. Dude, then you go to like a bonus stage and does the whole thing from like Donkey Kong Country 2 where it shows the characters like beating up the enemy for a beat up the enemy challenge. Like, man, I'm so happy. It's just so cool to see so many of these other characters going along and just kind of doing those games again, but polishing the hell out of them. The only thing I'm iffy about with Nico Dorico is they're supposed to be mongooses. They don't really look like mongooses to me, but you know, I can still appreciate that they just took an animal that somehow has not gotten a video game mascot representation yet, and we got it. So the mongoose fan base finally has a mascot to look up to. That's nice. Water levels are here, the silhouette levels are here, you have rocket barrel equivalents, they're here as well. It can get a little challenging near the end, and it's definitely a longer adventure than Marsupilami and Kaze and the Wild Masks, but it's still a really fun time. Definitely not the hardest game in the world, but if you're just a sucker for a little platformer like this that's just filled with a ton of charm, I really think this is the one for you. Nico Dorico, The Magical World. Good stuff, man. Hope there's more of this in the future.
Okay.
Last but certainly not least, the most recent game release of the bunch, Windswept. Finally, we have another game inspired by Donkey Kong Country that is going for one of the original franchise's biggest gimmicks that the other indie games haven't gone with yet. In this game, you play as a little duck and a little turtle, and you can swap between them on the fly, you can pick them up and throw them around. Finally, the monkey throwing mechanic from classic Donkey Kong Country is back. And there's a lot more control to which combination you go with than there would be in a typical Donkey Kong Country game. While in DKC 3 you did have to sometimes choose when you wanted to throw Kitty as opposed to Dixie, here, when you play as the turtle, you can have the duck go on your back and do a double jump, or when you play as the duck, you will grab hold of the turtle and throw them so they can attack something far away. Oh, and by the way, the duck's name is Marbles, and the turtle's name is Checkers. I love them. But we are once again back to classic Donkey Kong Country challenge with things being a whole lot based around difficulty, tight platforming, and difficulty. This, if you've been wanting a game that's of this style, that's pretty challenging, this is the one out of the entire bunch that you're gonna want, because this game, it definitely tests you. Oh my goodness, it tests you like pretty early on. It could really start to put wear and tear on your hands. If you want a breezy playthrough just to get to the end of the stages, like sure, maybe that's one thing, but I want every stupid shiny gold coin that has letters on it. I want to find every single portal and collectible, and it could just be so much, but because the controls feel so tight and responsive, it always feels like it's my fault when I fail, and that is exactly what you want. And of course, animal buddies show up as well to assist with the platforming and also to just look adorable. This game looks adorable. The art style is just so eye-catching to me, while so many of the other games, whether they be based on sprites or 3D models, are so focused on just being some of the most detailed environments that a 2D platformer can possibly have. But here, everything just kind of chibi and strong, bold colors. It really stands out. It's adorable, but because of the difficulty, there's also some pain behind those eyes. And I love it so. But check this out. When you get to the end of a level, it's kind of similar to DKC 2. You jump on this platform and then this thing goes up there and then boom, you get to the top and look at that! A little dance. Oh man, it's so cool. There's a lot more to Windswept as well as all the other games in this video that I'm not going over because I want you to experience these games for yourself to see what little surprises they have in store for those who are willing to put the time into them. But kudos to all of the developers who made games like this, because having a game that is so inspired by Donkey Kong Country while taking what worked in those games and then just polishing them up and giving them your own little spin doesn't happen anywhere near as much as it should. But if this style of game does blow up at some point in the future, you should all know that you started a fantastic trend and you've all contributed some really great 2D platformers into the indie game space. So we got 5 main Donkey Kong Country games across 2 different gameplay styles, and I wanted to match that with 5 indie games that do some of those things in their own unique ways, and in some cases, even a little bit better. Plus with Donkey Kong Bonanza, and you get a whole redesign of Donkey Kong, and it's in 3D now, who knows when we'll ever get a 2D Donkey Kong game ever again. It's up to the indies to do what Nintendo don't. Thank you guys so much for all you do. Bro, I kind of want to go back and play that Marsupilami Genesis game now. Is that game any good?